Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we've got a wild story that'll hook you from the start. A tale of a kid, his grandpa, and a fishing trip that turns into a mystery straight out of a detective novel. It's packed with heart, suspense, and a small-town secret that'll keep you glued to your screen. So grab a snack, hit that like button if you're excited, and let's dive into the Suitcase in the River. The sun hung low over Willow Creek, painting the Willow River gold as Tommy Miller cast his fishing line. It was July the 4th, 2025, Independence Day, and the 12-year-old's favorite holiday, not for the fireworks, but for the fishing trips with his grandpa, Joe. The riverbank was their spot, a quiet bend shaded by tall pines where the water ran clear and the fish all was bit. Tommy grinned, his freckled face lit with focus as he reeled in his line. "Got one yet, Grandpa?" he called, his voice bouncing off the water. Joe Miller, 68 and weathered like the old dock nearby, chuckled from his folding chair. His gray hair peeked from under a faded fishing hat, and his hands, rough from years as a fisherman, baited a hook with ease. "Patience, Tommy," he said, his deep voice warm. "Fish don't rush, and neither should you." Joe loved these trips as much as Tommy did. They were more than tradition. They were where he taught his grandson about life, one cast at a time. Willow Creek was a small town, the kind where everyone knew your name and your business. Tucked in the Pacific Northwest, it had a sleepy charm, cozy diners, a creaky pier, and a river that wound through it like a lifeline. But beneath the surface, the town carried a shadow. 3 years ago, in 2022, Sheriff Hank Grayson vanished without a trace. His car was found near the river, keys still in the ignition, and folks figured he'd drowned or skipped town. The mystery stung, especially for Joe, who'd called Hank a friend. Tommy, only 9 then, remembered the candlelit vigils and his grandpa's quiet grief. Today, though, the river felt alive, buzzing with summer. Tommy adjusted his cap, a hand-me-down from Joe, and cast again. "Think we'll catch a big one?" he asked, eyes bright. Joe leaned back, squinting at the water. "Maybe, or maybe the river's got something else for us." He winked, but his words carried a weight neither of them could have guessed. They fished for an hour, swapping stories. Joe told of the time he and Hank fixed a boat during a storm, laughing through the rain. Tommy, who devoured detective books, spun a tale about catching a fish so huge it pulled him to China. Joe ruffled his hair. "You've got an imagination, kid." Tommy beamed, dreaming of adventures beyond the riverbank. Then, as Tommy reeled in a snag, he frowned. "Grandpa, my line's caught." Joe set down his rod and waded into the shallows, his boots splashing. "Probably a branch," he said, tugging the line. But it wasn't a branch. Something heavy shifted under the water, glinting black in the sunlight. Tommy squinted, heart racing. "What's that?" Joe grabbed the line, pulling hard. A shape emerged, a black suitcase, moss-covered and lodged against a rock. It was heavy, its edges scuffed, but solid, like it had been underwater for years. Tommy scrambled to help, his sneakers slipping on wet stones. "Is it treasure?" he asked, half joking, his eyes wide with wonder. Joe hauled the suitcase onto the bank, water dripping from its seams. It was locked, no tags or names, just a plain, sturdy case that didn't belong in their river. "This ain't no treasure," Joe said, his voice low. He glanced around as if the pines might be watching. Tommy bounced on his toes. "Can we open it? Please?" Joe hesitated. He'd seen enough of Willow Creek's secrets to know not every find was good news, but Tommy's excitement was infectious, and curiosity tugged at him too. "All right," he said, pulling a fishing knife from his tackle box. "But we're careful, got it?" Tommy nodded, holding his breath as Joe pried the lock. The suitcase popped open with a creak, revealing its secrets. Inside were bundles of cash wrapped tight in plastic, stacks of 20s and hundreds. Tommy's jaw dropped. "Whoa," he whispered. "That's got to be $1 million." Joe's face tightened. He lifted a plastic bag from the case, sealed against the water. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a handwritten letter, ink faded but readable. Joe's hands shook as he unfolded it, his eyes scanning the words. "This is from Hank," he said, voice barely above a whisper. Tommy leaned in, confused. "Sheriff Hank? The one who disappeared?" Joe nodded, reading aloud. The letter was short, desperate. Hank wrote that he'd uncovered a weapons smuggling ring in Willow Creek, run by someone called the Captain. He feared for his life, hid the suitcase as proof, and begged whoever found it to get it to the police. The last line chilled. "Them. They're watching me. If I'm gone, don't let them win." Tommy's heart pounded. This was no fish. It was a mystery, like something from his books. "Grandpa, we're rich," he said, then caught Joe's stern look. "I mean, we gotta tell someone, right?" Joe closed the suitcase, his jaw set. "We're taking this to the police, Tommy. This money's trouble, and Hank's letter. It's bigger than us." Tommy's excitement dimmed, but he trusted. "Joe!" Still, his mind raced with questions. Who was the captain? Why was the suitcase here? And what happened to Hank? They packed up, the suitcase heavy between them, and headed for Joe's old truck. The river sparkled behind them, hiding its secrets. As they drove to the Willow Creek police station, Tommy clutched the letter's plastic bag, feeling like a detective on his first case. Joe's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, uneasy, as if he sensed eyes on them. At the station they met Sheriff Laura Bennett, a sharp woman in her 30s who'd taken over after Hank. Her office was small, cluttered with files, but her gaze was steady. "Joe, Tommy," she said, surprised. "What's this about?" Joe set the suitcase on her desk. "We found something in the river," he said, "and it's got Hank's name on it." Laura opened the case, her eyes widening at the cash, then narrowing as she read the letter. "This changes everything," she said, voice tight. "Hank didn't run. He was onto something big." Tommy piped up. "Are we in danger?" Laura's face softened. "Not if you keep this quiet. Let me handle it." She locked the suitcase in a safe, but her mind was already racing. The smuggling ring might still be out there, and Hank's letter was a spark that could ignite the truth or burn them all. As Tommy and Joe left the station, the sun dipped below the trees, casting long shadows. Tommy's heart buzzed with adventure, but Joe's grip on his shoulder was firm. "No telling anyone, Tommy," he said. "Not yet." Tommy nodded, but his eyes caught a flicker, a man in a dark jacket across the street, watching them. Then, slipping away. The river had given up one secret, but Willow Creek had more to hide. The Willow Creek police station faded in Joe Miller's rearview mirror as he drove his old pickup truck through the dusky streets, Tommy fidgeting beside him. The sun had set, leaving the town bathed in a soft purple glow, but Tommy's mind was anything but calm. The black suitcase they'd pulled from the Willow River hours ago, stuffed with cash and a letter from the missing Sheriff Hank Grayson, felt like a bomb ticking in his brain. He clutched the plastic bag that had held Hank's letter, now empty since Sheriff Laura Bennett locked it away. "Grandpa," Tommy said, his voice buzzing, "you think that suitcase means Hank's still out there?" Joe's hands tightened on the wheel, his weathered face creased with worry. "I don't know, Tommy," he said, eyes flicking to the side mirror. "But that letter? It's trouble. Hank was messing with dangerous folks." He remembered the man in the dark jacket they'd glimpsed outside the station, a shadow that vanished too quick. Joe's gut told him to keep Tommy close. "You heard Sheriff Laura. We keep this quiet." Tommy nodded, but his heart raced like he'd hooked a monster fish. At 12, he lived for detective stories, books where kids solved crimes and saved the day. That suitcase wasn't just a find, it was his chance to be a hero, like Hank. "What if we helped?" he asked, leaning forward. "Like, looked for clues or something?" Joe shot him a look, half stern, half amused. "You're not Sherlock Holmes, kid. This is real life. We did our part. Now let Laura handle it." But Tommy's grin didn't fade. He was already picturing himself cracking the case, maybe even finding Hank. Back at the station, Sheriff Laura Bennett sat at her desk, the suitcase locked in a safe behind her. The letter from Hank Grayson lay under a lamp, its faded words, staring up like a ghost. Weapons smuggling ring. The captain. They're watching me. Laura's jaw clenched. She'd taken over as sheriff 3 years ago, after Hank's disappearance tore a hole in Willow Creek. Folks thought he'd drowned or run off, his car found abandoned by the river. But this letter changed everything. Hank hadn't run. He'd been hunting something big, and it cost him. Laura, 35 and sharp as a tack, wasn't one to back down. She'd grown up in Willow Creek, knew its quirks and secrets, and Hank had been her mentor, teaching her to trust her instincts. Now those instincts screamed that the smuggling ring was still out there. She grabbed her phone and called Deputy Sam Carter, a young officer with a quick smile and a hunger to prove himself. "Sam, get to the station," she said. "Bring Maggie Ruiz from County Forensics. We've got a case." By 9 p.m., the station's small meeting room hummed with tension. Sam, 28, leaned against the wall, his uniform crisp. Maggie, a forensic analyst with a knack for details, spread Hank's letter on the table. "Handwriting's his," Maggie said, adjusting her glasses. "Ink's degraded, but the paper's preserved. This was written in a hurry, maybe 3 years ago," she pointed to a smudge. "He was scared," Laura paced, her boots clicking. "Hank said, 'The captain runs this smuggling ring, weapons, cash, and he hid that suitcase to blow it open. We need to know who the captain is and if they're still operating,'" Sam frowned. "After 3 years? Could be long gone." Laura shook her head. "That much cash doesn't sit in a river unless someone's still watching it." Maggie pulled up Hank's old case files on her laptop. "He was investigating the old shipyard before he vanished," she said. "The one owned by Victor Malone. Lots of notes about late-night shipments, but nothing concrete." Laura's eyes narrowed. Victor, a wealthy businessman, had closed the shipyard and left town after Hank disappeared. Coincidence? She didn't think so. "Let's dig into Victor," Laura said, "and the shipyard," quietly. "If this ring's active, they'll know we have the suitcase soon enough." Sam nodded, but Maggie hesitated. "Laura, there's something else. I found a bank account in Hank's name, opened a month before he vanished. Deposits match the cash in the suitcase." Laura froze. "You're saying Hank was dirty?" Maggie shrugged. "Or someone framed him?" The idea hit Laura like a punch. Hank, dirty. She couldn't buy it, but doubt gnawed at her. "Keep that between us," she said. "We clear Hank's name or prove he was crooked. Either way, we start with the shipyard." Meanwhile, at Joe's small house on the edge of town, Tommy sat on the couch, a plate of leftover barbecue on his lap. The 4th of July fireworks popped outside, but his mind was on the suitcase. Joe sank into his recliner, sipping coffee, his fishing hat still on. "You're too quiet, kid," Joe said. "That's trouble." Tommy grinned, setting his plate down. "I'm just thinking, what if the captain's still in Willow Creek, like hiding in plain sight?" Joe sighed, rubbing his temples. "Tommy, you gotta let this go. It's not a game. Hank, he was my friend. Losing him hurt this town bad." His voice cracked and Tommy's grin faded. He hadn't seen Joe this shaken before. "Tell me about him," Tommy said softly. Joe leaned back, eyes distant. Hank was the kind of guy who'd stop. To help a stranger, no questions asked. "One winter, my boat got busted up in a storm. Hank stayed out in the rain with me, fixing it till midnight. Never asked for a dime." Joe smiled, then frowned. "When he went missing, folks said he took off with some money. I never believed it. That letter proves I was right." Tommy's chest tightened. He wanted to help, not just for the adventure, but for Joe, for Hank. "We could look around, Grandpa, just a little, like by the river again." Joe shook his head. "You're staying out of this, Tommy. Promise me." Tommy crossed his fingers behind his back. "Promise," he said, but his mind was already spinning. The next morning, Tommy woke early, sneaking a look at Joe's old fishing log on the kitchen table. It listed their trips, including ones near the abandoned shipyard, a rusty sprawl by the river's mouth, Hank's letter mentioned shipments, and Tommy's detective books taught him to follow the clues. "The shipyard," he muttered, scribbling the idea in his notebook. Joe caught him, frowning. "What's that?" Tommy stuffed the notebook in his pocket. "Nothing? Can we fish again today?" Joe raised an eyebrow but nodded. "All right, but we're sticking to our spot. No funny business." Tommy grinned, hiding his plan. He'd convinced Joe to swing by the shipyard, just close enough to peek. At the station, Laura pored over maps of the shipyard, her coffee cold. Sam burst in, holding a file. "Got something." Hank's last report mentioned a guy named Ray Carver, a shipyard worker with a rap sheet. "He's still in town. Works odd jobs." Laura's pulse quickened. "Find him," she said, "and get eyes on the shipyard. If the captain's out there, we're closing in." As Laura planned her next move, Tommy and Joe loaded their fishing gear into the truck, the river calling them back. Tommy's notebook burned a hole in his pocket, his plan to snoop by the shipyard growing bolder. Joe hummed an old tune, unaware of Tommy's scheme. But his eyes kept scanning the road as if he felt the same shadow from last night. Unseen, Ray Carver watched from a parked car, his dark jacket blending with the morning haze. He dialed EHA number, his voice low. "The kid and the old man are moving again," he said. "They're getting too close." A voice on the other end, cold and sharp, replied, "Keep them in line. The captain doesn't like loose ends." Ray nodded, eyes locked on Joe's truck as it rolled toward the river, carrying Tommy straight into the heart of Willow Creek's darkest secret. The Willow River sparkled under the morning sun, its current whispering secrets as Tommy Miller hopped out of Joe's pickup truck. It was July 5th, 2025, the day after their big find, a black suitcase stuffed with cash and a letter from the missing Sheriff Hank Grayson. Tommy's sneakers crunched on the gravel path leading to their usual fishing spot, but his eyes were fixed on the horizon, where the old shipyard loomed like a rusted giant. His notebook, tucked in his back pocket, held one word scribbled in it. Bold, shipyard. That's where Hank's letter pointed, and Tommy was itching to play detective. Joe slung their fishing gear over his shoulder, his faded hat shading his eyes. "Stay close, Tommy," he said, voice firm. He'd caught the glint in his grandson's eye, the same one that meant trouble. At 68, Joe knew Willow Creek's underbelly better than most, and Hank's letter about a weapons smuggling ring had him on edge. He'd seen that man in the dark jacket yesterday, a shadow trailing them from the police station. "We're fishing, not chasing ghosts," Tommy grinned, adjusting his cap. "Sure, Grandpa." But his heart thumped like a drum. His detective books always started with a clue, and the shipyard, mentioned in Hank's notes about shipments, was his. He just needed Joe to swing by it, even for a peek. "Can we try a new spot today, maybe downriver?" he asked, voice casual. Joe raised an eyebrow, setting up his rod. "Our spot's fine. What's with you, kid?" Tommy shrugged, casting his line. "Just thought it'd be fun. Closer to the shipyard, maybe." Joe's hands paused on his bait. "Tommy," he said, low and serious, "you promised to stay out of this." Tommy's grin faded. He hated letting Joe down, but Hank's letter burned in his mind. "I just want to help," he mumbled. "For Hank. You said he was your friend." Joe's face softened. Memories of Hank, fixing boats, sharing coffee at the diner, flooding back. "He was," Joe said. "But helping means staying safe. Laura's got this." Across town at the Willow Creek Police Station, Sheriff Laura Bennett pored over a map of the shipyard, her coffee mug cold. Deputy Sam Carter stood by her desk, flipping through a file on Ray Carver, the shipyard worker Hank had flagged before vanishing. "Carver's got a record," Sam said, his voice eager. "Petty theft, bar fights. Works at the lumberyard now, but he was tight with the shipyard crew back when Hank was sniffing around." Laura nodded, her sharp eyes tracing the map's faded lines. The shipyard, owned by Victor Malone, had been a hub for building fishing boats until it shut down 3 years ago, right after Hank disappeared. Hank's letter about a smuggling ring, led by someone called the Captain, pointed straight to it. "Carver's our way in," she said. "Find him, Sam, quietly." Maggie Ruiz, the county forensic analyst, poked her head in, holding a laptop. "Got something else," she said. "Hank's files mention a hidden dock at the shipyard used for off-book shipments. Could be where they moved weapons." Laura's pulse quickened. "Any chance it's still active?" Maggie shrugged. "Only one way to find out. I can pull satellite images, but we'll need eyes on the ground." Laura hesitated. A full stakeout risked tipping off the smugglers, especially if they knew about the suitcase Tommy and Joe found. She still couldn't shake Maggie's discovery. A bank account in Hank's name with deposits matching the suitcase's cash. Was Hank framed, or had her mentor been dirty? "Set up cameras near the shipyard," Laura told Maggie. "No moves till we know more." Back at the river, Tommy cast his line, but his eyes kept drifting to the shipyard silhouette, its cranes like skeletal fingers against the sky. Joe sat in his folding chair, baiting a hook, but his gaze was sharp, watching Tommy like a hawk. The boy's curiosity was a spark, and Joe feared it'd catch fire. "Tell you what," Joe said, breaking the silence. "We'll fish a bit, then head to Evelyn's diner for burgers. Deal?" Tommy perked up. "Can we drive by the shipyard on the way?" Joe sighed, half laughing. "You're relentless, kid." He didn't say yes, but he didn't say no, and Tommy took it as a win. He'd get his peak one way or another. They fished for an hour, the river calm, but Tommy's mind raced. He imagined Hank hiding the suitcase, dodging shadows in the night. His line snagged, and he tugged, annoyed. "Another rock," he muttered, wading in. But as he pulled, he saw something odd. Tire tracks in the mud, fresh and deep, leading toward the shipyard's fence. Nearby, a cluster of reeds hid a wooden dock, small and weathered, not on any map he'd seen in Joe's fishing logs. "Grandpa." "Look," Tommy called, pointing. Joe waded over, frowning. "That's new," he said, voice low. The dock was hidden, perfect for quiet loading. Joe's gut twisted. Hank had mentioned shipments by the river. "We're not poking around," he said, but Tommy was already snapping photos with his phone, heart pounding. "This could help, Laura," Tommy said. "It's a clue." Joe grabbed his shoulder. "Enough, Tommy. We're leaving." But his eyes lingered on the dock, unease growing. He'd fished here for decades and never seen it. "We'll show Laura the photos," he said finally. "But you're done playing detective." Tommy nodded, but his grin was unstoppable. He'd found something real, like in his books. As they packed up, a rustle in the bushes made Joe freeze. He scanned the trees, seeing nothing, but the hairs on his neck stood up. "Let's go," he said, hurrying Tommy to the truck. At the diner, Evelyn, the gray-haired owner, greeted them with a smile. "Heard you two had an adventure yesterday," she said, pouring Joe's coffee. News traveled fast in Willow Creek, and Tommy squirmed, remembering Laura's warning to stay quiet. "Just fishing," Joe said, his tone final. Evelyn winked at Tommy. "Bet you caught something big," Tommy grinned, but Joe's nudge kept him silent. As they ate burgers, a man slid into a booth across the room. Ray Carver, his dark jacket unzipped, eyes locked on Joe and Tommy. Joe didn't notice, but Tommy did, his stomach twisting. Ray's stare wasn't friendly. Tommy leaned close to Joe. "That guy's watching us," he whispered. Joe glanced over, his face hardening. "Eat your fries," he said, but his hand tightened on his mug. Ray stood, tossed cash on the table, and left, his boots echoing. Joe waited a beat, then paid their bill. "We're telling Laura about those photos," he said, "and that guy." At the station, Laura was on the phone, coordinating shipyard surveillance, when Joe and Tommy walked in. Tommy held out his phone, photos of the tire tracks and dock glowing on the screen. "We found this by the shipyard," he said, voice eager. Laura's eyes widened. "You were where?" Joe cut in. "My fault. Kid's too curious. But there's something else. A guy in a dark jacket watching us at Evelyn's." Laura's jaw tightened. "Ray Carver." "Good work, Tommy," she said, saving the photos. "But you two stay away from the shipyard. Understand?" Tommy nodded, but his heart soared. He'd helped. Joe ruffled his hair, half proud, half worried. Let's go home, kid." As they left, Laura called Sam. "Carver's tailing Joe and Tommy," she said. "Pick him up for questioning." But across town, Ray Carver was already on the move, slipping into an alley behind the diner. He pulled out a burner phone, his voice low. "The kid snooping by the shipyard," he said. "Took pictures." A voice cold as steel answered, "Deal with it, Ray. The captain wants this buried like Hank." Ray's eyes darted to the river, where the shipyards. Shadow stretched long, hiding secrets that Tommy was inching closer to uncovering. The Willow Creek police station was quiet as Sheriff Laura Bennett leaned over her desk, Tommy's photos of the shipyard dock glowing on her computer screen. It was the evening of July 5th, 2025, and the air felt thick with secrets. The tire tracks and hidden dock Tommy and Joe had found by the river were no coincidence. They matched Hank Grayson's old notes about off-book shipments at the shipyard. Laura's gut told her the weapons smuggling ring Hank had uncovered was alive and well, and Ray Carver, the man tailing Tommy and Joe, was her key to cracking it. Laura glanced at the clock, 7:30 p.m. She'd sent Deputy Sam Carter to pick up Ray for questioning, but her mind kept circling back to Hank's letter, locked in the station safe. "The captain. They're watching me." The words haunted her, especially after Maggie's bombshell about a bank account in Hank's name, stuffed with cash like the suitcases. Was her old mentor framed, or had he been part of the ring? Laura pushed the doubt aside. She owed Hank the truth. Across town, Tommy Miller sat at the kitchen table in Joe's small house, his notebook open to a page scrawled with ideas: shipyard, dock, the captain. The suitcase they'd pulled from the Willow River 2 days ago had turned his summer into a real-life detective story, and he wasn't backing down. Joe, washing dishes, caught Tommy's furrowed brow. "You're scheming again," Joe said, drying his hands. "I told you, kid, no more detective stuff." Tommy looked up, his freckled face stubborn. "But we helped Grandpa." Those photos made Laura think, what if we find more clues? Joe sighed, his fishing hat on the counter. Gray hair must. At 68, he'd seen Willow Creek weather storms, but this, Hank's letter, the smuggling ring, felt like a hurricane brewing. "You're 12, Tommy," he said. "Your job's to fish, not chase crooks. Laura's got Ray Carver in her sights. Let her do her job." Tommy's shoulders slumped, but his mind raced. Ray, the guy in the dark jacket, at Evelyn's diner, had creeped him out, staring like a wolf eyeing prey. Tommy's detective books taught him that clues were everywhere. You just had to look. "Can I go to the library tomorrow?" he asked, voice innocent. "Need books for summer reading." Joe raised an eyebrow, but nodded. "Fine, but straight. There and back. No detours." Tommy grinned, hiding his real plan. The Willow Creek Library had old newspapers, and he'd bet they held secrets about the shipyard, and maybe the captain. The next morning, July 6th, Laura sat across from Ray Carver in the station's interrogation room. Ray, mid-40s, with a scruffy beard and hard eyes, slouched in his chair, his dark jacket on the backrest. Sam stood by the door, arms crossed, while Laura slid Hank's file across the table. "You worked at the shipyard when Hank Grayson was poking around," she said, voice calm but sharp. "He flagged you for suspicious activity. Care to explain?" Ray smirked, picking at a fingernail. "Hank was paranoid. Saw conspiracies everywhere. I just hauled crates, Sheriff. Nothing shady." Laura leaned forward, holding up a photo of the suitcase. "This says different. Found in the river with Hank's letter about a smuggling ring. You know anything about that?" Ray's smirk faltered, but he shrugged. "River's full of junk. Don't pin it on me." Laura's eyes narrowed. Ray was slippery, but his twitchy hands betrayed him. "We know you've been watching Joe and Tommy Miller," she said. "Why?" Ray's jaw tightened. "Just curious. Small town, you know." Laura didn't buy it. "Stay away from them, Ray, and don't leave town." As Ray left, Laura called Maggie Ruiz. "Anything on those shipyard cameras?" Maggie's voice crackled through the phone. Got footage from last night. Trucks moving in and out, no plates visible. Looks like they're loading something heavy. Could be weapons. Laura's pulse quickened. Keep watching and dig into Victor Malone. He owned that shipyard. If he's tied to the captain, we need proof. At the library, Tommy pushed through the heavy doors, the smell of old books hitting him like a hug. The Willow Creek Library was a cozy brick building, its shelves packed with history. Clara Thompson, the librarian, smiled from behind the counter. Tommy Miller, back already? More detective novels? Tommy grinned, adjusting his cap. Something like that. Got any old newspapers? Like from 3 years ago? Clara raised an eyebrow but led him to the archive room, where microfilm machines hummed. What's got you curious? She asked. Tommy hesitated, remembering Laura's warning to keep quiet. Just a project, he said, flipping through index cards. Clara chuckled. You're Joe's grandson, all right, always chasing something. Tommy spent an hour scanning articles, his notebook filling up. He found stories about the shipyard's closure in 2022, owned by Victor Malone, a big shot who'd moved to Seattle. One article mentioned Victor's brother, Ethan Malone, a former Coast Guard officer who'd worked at the shipyard briefly. Tommy's heart skipped. A Coast Guard guy could be the captain, right? He jotted it down, then found a photo of the shipyard crew. Ray Carver stood in the back, smirking. As Tommy copied the article, a shadow fell over him. He looked up to see Ray Carver, his dark jacket unzipped, standing too close. "What you reading, kid?" Ray asked, voice low. Tommy's stomach dropped. He slammed his notebook shut, heart pounding. "Nothing," he said, backing away. Ray stepped closer, eyeing the microfilm. "You and your grandpa keep popping up where you don't belong. Hand over that notebook." Tommy's legs shook, but he bolted, ducking between shelves. Clara, hearing the commotion, stepped in. "Ray Carver, leave him alone," she snapped, her voice fierce. Ray glared but backed off, muttering, "Tell the kid to watch his step." He stormed out, leaving Tommy clutching his notebook, breathless. Clara knelt beside him. "You okay, Tommy?" He nodded, still shaken. "Don't tell Grandpa," he begged. "He'll ground me forever." Clara frowned, but agreed. "What's this about, kid?" Tommy bit his lip. "Just stuff about the shipyard. Can you get this to Sheriff Laura?" He tore out his notes about Ethan Malone and the shipyard crew, handing them over. Clara tucked the pages away. "I'll drop them off, but you stay out of trouble, hear me?" Tommy nodded, but his mind was on fire. Ray's threat meant he was on to something big. He had to tell Joe, even if it meant a lecture. That evening, Joe was fixing dinner, grilled, cheese and tomato soup, when Tommy burst in, spilling the library story. Joe's face went from annoyed to worried. "Tommy, you promised," he said, slamming a spatula down. "Ray Carver's dangerous. What if Clara hadn't been there?" Tommy's eyes welled up. "I just wanted to help Hank. For you." Joe softened, pulling Tommy into a hug. "I know, kid, but you're scaring me. Hank wouldn't want you in danger." He sighed, rubbing his neck. "We'll take your notes to Laura ourselves. But this is the last of it. Understand?" Tommy nodded, crossing his fingers behind his back. He couldn't stop now, not when he was so close. At the station, Laura read Tommy's notes, her eyes widening at Ethan Malone's name. "Kid's got a nose for this," she told Sam, who'd come up empty on Ray's questioning. "Ethan was Coast Guard, had access to shipping routes. Could be our captain." She grabbed her jacket. "Let's visit Victor Malone in Seattle tomorrow. If his brother's running this, Victor knows something." As Laura planned her trip, Tommy lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. His notebook sat on his nightstand, Ethan's name circled. Downstairs, Joe locked the doors, his fishing hat on the rack, but sleep wouldn't come. He felt the same shadow he'd sensed by the river, closer now. Outside, Ray Carver leaned against a lamppost watching Joe's house. He dialed his burner phone, voice low. "The kid's digging into Ethan," he said. "He's trouble." The captain's voice crackled back, icy and final. "Then make sure he stops, Ray. No more mistakes." Ray nodded, his eyes glinting in the dark, as Willow Creek's secrets tightened their grip around Tommy's fearless heart. The morning sun glinted off the Willow River, but Tommy Miller barely noticed as he pedaled his bike through Willow Creek's quiet streets. It was July 7th, 2025, 3 days since he and Grandpa Joe had pulled a black suitcase from the river, uncovering a letter from the missing sheriff, Hank Grayson. That letter, pointing to a weapons smuggling ring led by someone called the Captain, had turned Tommy's summer into a detective adventure. His notebook, stuffed in his backpack, held a new clue. Ethan Malone, a former Coast Guard officer, tied to the shipyard. Tommy's run-in with Ray Carver at the library yesterday still made his stomach twist, but it only fueled his fire. He had to keep digging. Joe was at the hardware store fixing a boat motor, so Tommy had slipped out, promising to stay home. But his detective books always said the hero followed the trail, no matter the risk. He wasn't heading far, just to the pier near the shipyard, where he'd spotted those tire tracks and hidden Doc. Maybe he'd see something new, something to help Sheriff Laura Bennett. Tommy's cap bounced as he pedaled, his heart thumping like a drum. "Just a quick look," he muttered, ignoring the voice in his head that sounded like Joe saying, "Stay out of it." At the Willow Creek police station, Laura packed a notebook and her badge, ready to drive to Seattle. She'd spent the night studying Tommy's library notes about Ethan Malone, Victor Malone's brother, and the shipyard's shady past. Victor, who'd owned the shipyard before it closed in 2022, was her best shot at answers. If Ethan was the captain, Victor might know, or be covering for him. Laura's coffee sat cold on her desk next to Hank's letter. "They're watching me." The words gnawed at her, alongside the bank account in Hank's name that suggested he'd been dirty. She refused to believe it, but the doubt lingered like a bad smell. Deputy Sam Carter knocked, his uniform crisp. "Ready to roll, Sheriff?" Laura nodded, grabbing her jacket. "You're with Maggie, keeping eyes on the shipyard cameras. If Ray Carver shows, tail him." Sam frowned. "You sure about going to Seattle alone? Victor's slippery." Laura's eyes flashed. "I can handle him. Just make sure Ray doesn't get near Joe or Tommy." In Seattle, Victor Malone lived in a sleek condo overlooking the Puget Sound, a far cry from Willow Creek's dusty streets. Laura parked her cruiser and rode the elevator to the 15th floor, her boots echoing in the marble hallway. Victor, 50, and polished in a tailored suit, opened the door, his smile tight. "Sheriff Bennett," he said, ushering her in. "What brings you up here?" Laura cut to the chase, setting Hank's letter on his glass coffee table. "This was found in the Willow River. Hank Grayson wrote it. Says a smuggling ring was operating out of your shipyard. Know anything about that?" Victor's face stayed calm, but his fingers twitched. "Hank was troubled," he said. "Saw threats where there weren't any. My shipyard's been closed for years." Laura leaned forward, voice steady. "Your brother, Ethan, worked there. Coast Guard guy. Knew shipping routes. Hank mentioned—" "A captain. Ring any bells?" Victor's eyes darted to the window, then back. "Ethan's a drifter. Moves around. We're not close. If he was involved in something, I didn't know." His voice was smooth, but Laura caught the sweat on his brow. He was hiding something. "Stay in town, Victor," she said, standing. "We'll talk again." As she left, Victor's hand shook as he locked the door, his cool facade cracking. Laura's instinct screamed. Victor was scared, maybe, of Ethan. She called Maggie from her car. "Victor's lying. Dig into Ethan's Coast Guard records. I'm heading back." Back in Willow Creek, Tommy chained his bike to a post near the pier, the shipyard's rusty fence looming 100 yards away. The river lapped at the bank and gulls circled overhead, their cries sharp. Tommy crouched behind a stack of old crates, scanning the shipyard. The hidden dock he'd photographed was still there, reeds swaying around it. But something new caught his eye. A black van, parked just inside the fence, its engine idling. 2 men loaded crates onto a boat tied to the dock, moving fast, like they didn't want to be seen. Tommy's heart raced. This was it. Proof the shipyard was active, just like Hank's letters said. He pulled out his phone, snapping photos, his hands shaky but steady enough. The men's faces were blurry, but the crates looked heavy, maybe weapons. Tommy grinned, imagining Laura's face when she saw this. "Gotcha," he whispered, but a shadow fell over him. Tommy spun, heart in his throat, to see Ray Carver, his dark jacket blending with the crate's shadows. "You're a nosy kid," Ray growled, grabbing for Tommy's phone. Tommy dodged, scrambling toward his bike, but Ray was faster, pinning him against a crate. "Give me those pictures, or you're in big trouble." Tommy's legs shook, but he clutched his phone tight. "Let me go," he yelled, hoping someone would hear. Ray's grip tightened, but a loud honk cut through the air. Joe's truck, barreling down the pier road. Joe had gone looking for Tommy after finding his room empty, his fishing log open to the shipyard page. "Get off him!" Joe shouted, slamming the door and charging toward Ray. Ray cursed, shoving Tommy aside and sprinting toward the shipyard fence, vanishing through a gap. Joe knelt, checking Tommy for bruises. "You okay, kid?" Tommy nodded, tears stinging his eyes. "I'm sorry, Grandpa. I just wanted to help." Joe's face was a mix of fury and relief. "You scared me half to death. No more sneaking. Off, hear me?" Tommy handed Joe his phone, the photos still there. "I saw them loading crates. It's gotta be the smugglers." Joe's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "We're taking this to Laura. Now." As they climbed into the truck, Tommy glanced back. The black van gone, the dock empty. But he'd seen enough to know the shipyard was alive with secrets. At the station, Laura was back from Seattle when Joe and Tommy burst in. Tommy spilled the story showing his photos. Laura's eyes widened, then narrowed. "You're lucky, Tommy. Ray's dangerous." She saved the images, her mind racing. The crates matched Maggie's footage from the shipyard cameras. "This is big," she said. "But you're done snooping. Both of you." Joe nodded, his arm around Tommy. "He's grounded till he's 30. Tommy winced, but felt a spark of pride. His photos were helping. Laura softened. "You did good, kid. But let me take it from here." She didn't mention Victor's fear or Ethan's shadow looming larger, but her resolve hardened. The captain was close, and she was closing in. That night, Joe locked the Yawas house tight, his fishing hat on the rack. Tommy sat on the couch, grounded but buzzing. "You think Laura'll catch the captain?" he asked. Joe sighed, ruffling Tommy's hair. "If anyone can, it's her. Now get to bed." Tommy nodded, but his notebook called to him. Ethan Malone was the key, and he wasn't done yet. Across town, Ray Carver slipped into a dark warehouse by the shipyard, his burner phone pressed to his ear. "The kid got away," he said, voice low. "Took more pictures." The captain's voice, cold and sharp, snapped back. "You're slipping, Ray. Clean this up or you're next." Ray's eyes darted to the crates stacked around him, their contents deadly. As he hung up, a figure watched from the shadows, Ethan Malone, his Coast Guard days long gone, his gaze as cold as the river, hiding Willow Creek's darkest truth. The Willow Creek police station buzzed with quiet tension as Sheriff Laura Bennett stared at her computer screen, the glow of Tommy's latest photos casting shadows on her face. It was the evening of July 7th, 2025, and the images of crates being loaded onto a boat at the shipyard's hidden dock confirmed what Hank Grayson's letter had warned. A weapon smuggling ring was alive in Willow Creek, led by someone called the Captain. Laura's jaw tightened. Tommy's snooping had nearly gotten him hurt by Ray Carver, but his photos were gold. They matched Maggie Ruiz's camera footage, proving the shipyard was no ghost town. Laura sipped cold coffee, her badge glinting under the desk lamp. Ethan Malone, the former Coast Guard officer Tommy had flagged in his library notes, was her prime suspect for the captain. Her visit to Victor Malone in Seattle yesterday had left her uneasy. Victor's sweaty brow and shaky hands screamed fear maybe of his brother. but the bank account in Hank's name, stuffed with cash like the suitcases, still gnawed at her. Had Hank been framed, or was her mentor part of this mess? She pushed the thought away, focusing on the shipyard. Maggie Ruiz burst in, her laptop under her arm. "Got something big," she said, setting it down. "I cross-checked Tommy's photos with satellite images from the shipyard. There's a heat signature under the main warehouse. Faint, but consistent. Could be a hidden basement." Laura's eyes narrowed. "A basement?" Hank's notes never mentioned that. Maggie nodded. "It's not on any blueprints. If they're storing weapons, that's the spot." Laura stood, her boots clicking. "We need to see it. Call Sam. Get the county SWAT team on standby. We're scoping the shipyard tonight, but quiet. No lights, no sirens." Maggie hesitated. "What about Ray Carver? He's still out there, tailing Tommy." Laura's face hardened. "Sam's got eyes on him. If Ray moves, we grab him." Across town, Tommy Miller slouched on the couch in Joe's living room, grounded for sneaking to the shipyard. His notebook lay on the coffee table, Ethan Malone's name circled in red. The run-in with Ray at the pier had scared him, but it also lit a fire. He'd seen those crates, heard Ray's threats. This was real, like his detective books, and he couldn't sit still. Joe, chopping carrots for dinner, glanced over. "You're too quiet, kid," he said, his fishing hat on. The rack. "That's trouble." Tommy grinned, but it was shaky. "Just thinking, Grandpa. What if Ethan's the captain? He's got to be hiding something at the shipyard." Joe set down his knife, his gray hair catching the kitchen light. At 68, he'd weathered plenty, but Tommy's stubborn streak was testing him. "You're grounded, Tommy," he said. "No more shipyard talk. Laura's handling it, and you're staying safe." Tommy's shoulders slumped. "But Hank was your friend. Don't you want to know what happened?" Joe's eyes softened. Memories of Hank, laughing over beers, fixing boats, flooding back. "I do," he said, voice low. "But I want you alive more. Hank wouldn't want you chasing his ghosts." Tommy nodded, but his fingers itched for his notebook. Grounded or not, he had to help. After dinner, Joe fell asleep in his recliner, the TV humming. Tommy tiptoed to the kitchen, grabbing Joe's old fishing log from the counter. The leather-bound book listed every trip they'd taken, including ones near the shipyard. Tommy flipped to 2022, the year Hank vanished, and found an entry, July 10th, shipyard run. "Saw lights in warehouse 2 a.m., told Hank. Tommy's heart skipped. Joe had seen something back then, maybe the smugglers, and told Hank. Was that why Hank got too close? Tommy scribbled the date in his notebook, his mind racing. The warehouse lights could mean the basement Maggie found. He had to tell Laura, but Joe would never let him out. He glanced at his sleeping grandpa, guilt tugging at him. "Sorry, Grandpa," he whispered, slipping the log back. He'd bike to the station at dawn before Joe woke up. That night, Laura, Sam, and Maggie crept toward the shipyard, their flashlights off, the river's murmur covering their steps. The SWAT team waited a mile away, ready if things went south. The shipyard loomed, its rusted cranes like claws against the moonlit sky. Laura's radio crackled softly. "Cameras show no movement," Maggie whispered, checking her tablet. "But those crates from Tommy's photos are still by the dock. They slipped through a gap in the fence, crouching behind a stack of barrels. The main warehouse, a hulking steel beast, stood silent. Laura pointed to a rusted door. "That's our way in," she said. Sam nodded, his hand on his holster, while Maggie scanned for traps. The door creaked open, revealing a dark, musty interior, crates, tarps, and the faint hum of machinery. Laura's flashlight swept the floor, landing on a trapdoor, barely visible under a tarp. "Pingo," she whispered. Maggie knelt, prying. It opened, revealing a concrete staircase descending into darkness. A faint glow flickered below, and the air smelled of oil and metal. "This is it," Laura said, her pulse racing. "Maggie, stay up here. Keep watch. Sam, with me." They descended, the stairs cold and narrow. At the bottom, a basement sprawled, crates stacked high, labeled with coded numbers. Laura opened one, her breath catching. rifles tightly packed, gleaming under her light. "Weapons," she said, "enough for an army." Sam whistled low. Hank was right. This is huge. But a noise, a boot scuff, made them freeze. Laura spun, her flashlight catching a figure in the shadows. Ray Carver, his dark jacket unzipped, a crowbar in hand. "You shouldn't be here, Sheriff," he growled, stepping forward. Sam drew his gun, but Laura held up a hand. "Drop it, Ray," she said, voice steady. "You're done?" Ray hesitated, then lunged, swinging the crowbar. Laura dodged, tackling him to the ground, her training kicking in. Sam cuffed Ray's wrists, his face grim. "Talk," Laura said, hauling Ray up. "Who's the captain?" Ray's eyes darted, fear replacing his smirk. "You don't get it," he spat. "He'll kill me." Before Laura could press, Maggie's voice crackled through the radio. "Truck's approaching! Get out!" Laura cursed, dragging Ray up the stairs. They burst out of the warehouse as headlights swept the shipyard, engines roaring. Laura shoved Ray into Maggie's custody, signaling Sam. "SWAT now!" The team surged in, lights flashing, as the trucks screeched to a halt, men scattering. The raid was chaos. Shouts, boots pounding, crates seized. But Laura's team held the line, SWAT rounding up the smugglers. Ray sat cuffed in a cruiser, head bowed. "It's Ethan Malone," he muttered finally. "The captain. He runs it all." Laura's heart pounded. Ethan, just as Tommy suspected. But where was he? As dawn broke, Tommy woke early, sneaking his bike from the garage. Joe still slept, the fishing log untouched. Tommy pedaled to the station, the river glinting beside him, his notebook heavy with Joe's clue about the warehouse lights. He didn't know about the raid, but he felt the truth closing in. At the station, Laura was briefing the SWAT commander when Tommy burst in, breathless. "Sheriff, I found something in Grandpa's log," he said, holding out his notebook. "Light set. The shipyard, back when Hank was around." "It's got to be the basement." Laura's eyes widened. "You're late, kid," she said, a rare smile breaking through. "We found it." And Ray named Ethan Malone. Tommy's jaw dropped. "I was right?" Laura nodded, but her face turned serious. "Ethan's still out there. Go home, Tommy. Stay with Joe." Tommy nodded, pride swelling, but worry crept in. Ethan was free, and Ray's threats echoed in his head. As Tommy biked home, the river sparkled, hiding its secrets. Joe was waiting, arms crossed, when Tommy rolled up. "You're in big trouble, kid," Joe said, but his hug was tight. No, more sneaking. Tommy grinned, but his eyes flicked to the river, where Ethan Malone's shadow loomed, a ghost from Hank's past, ready to strike. The Willow River shimmered under the midday sun, its calm surface hiding the storm brewing in Willow Creek. It was July 8th, 2025, and Sheriff Laura Bennett stood on the shipyard's hidden dock, where Tommy's photos had led her team to a major bust the night before. Crates of illegal weapons, enough to arm a small army, were now in county lockup, and Ray Carver sat in a cell, his confession naming Ethan Malone as the captain. But Ethan, the former Coast Guard officer running the smuggling ring, was a ghost, slipping through Laura's net, leaving her with a sinking feeling that the fight was far from over. Laura's boots crunched on the dock's weathered planks as she scanned the river. Hank Grayson's letter, found in the suitcase Tommy and Joe Miller pulled from the water, had blown open a 3-year-old mystery. Hank hadn't run or drowned. He'd been hunting Ethan's ring, and it cost him. The bank account in Hank's name still gnawed at Laura, suggesting he might have been dirty, but Ray's fear when he named Ethan told her Hank had been framed. She needed Ethan, and fast, before he vanished for good. At the station, Laura met with Deputy Sam Carter and Maggie Ruiz. "Ethan's got a boat," Maggie said, pulling up Coast Guard records on her laptop. "Registered to a dummy name, docked at Harper's Marina, 10 miles downriver, last pinged yesterday." Laura's eyes narrowed. "That's our shot. Sam, get a team to the marina quiet. Maggie, keep digging into Ethan's finances. If he's moving, he needs cash." Sam nodded, his face grim. "What about Tommy and Joe? Ray's locked up, but Ethan's still out there." Laura's jaw tightened. Tommy's clue from Joe's fishing log, lights at the shipyard in 2022, had helped find the basement, but the kid's snooping was a magnet for trouble. I told them to stay put, she said, but Tommy's stubborn. I'll check on them. Across town. Tommy slouched at the kitchen table in Joe's house, his notebook closed for once. He was grounded tighter than a fish in a net after sneaking to the station at dawn with the fishing log clue. Joe, frying bacon, shot him a look. "You're sticking close today, kid," he said, his gray hair mussed without his fishing hat. At 68, Joe's patience was wearing thin, but his love for Tommy was ironclad. No bikes, no shipyard, no nothing. Tommy's freckled face scrunched. "But I helped, Grandpa. Laura said I was right about Ethan." Joe set down the spatula, his voice soft but firm. "You did, and I'm proud. But you're 12, Tommy. Hank was my friend, and he'd hate seeing you in danger. Let Laura finish this." Tommy's shoulders slumped, but his heart still raced. Ethan was out there, and his detective books said the bad guy always slipped up eventually. Joe softened, sliding a plate of bacon and eggs across the table. "You what? We'll hit Evelyn's diner for lunch. You behave, maybe I'll let you off grounding early." Tommy's eyes lit up. "Deal." But his notebook, tucked in his pocket, called to him. The diner was a gossip hub. Maybe he'd hear something about Ethan. At Evelyn's diner, the lunch crowd filled the booths, the air thick with coffee and fried onion rings. Evelyn, the gray-haired owner, waved Joe and Tommy to a corner booth. "Heard you two been busy," she said, winking at Tommy. "Catch any big fish lately?" Joe chuckled, but his eyes warned Tommy to stay quiet about the suitcase. "Just the usual, Evelyn," he said. Tommy munched his burger, his ears perked for any shipyard talk. In the next booth, two dock workers spoke in low tones, their voices barely carrying. "Heard Ethan Malone's back," one said, sipping coffee. "Spotted at Harper's Marina, loading a boat last night." The other grunted. "Thought he left after the shipyard closed. Shady guy." Tommy's heart skipped, his fries forgotten. Harper's Marina? That was new. He leaned toward Joe, whispering, "Grandpa, they're talking about Ethan." Joe's face hardened. "Eat your lunch, Tommy. No eavesdropping." But Tommy couldn't help it. He scribbled Harper's Marina in his notebook under the table, his mind racing. If Ethan was there, Laura needed to know. He just had to figure out how to tell her without Joe grounding him for life. As they left the diner, Tommy glanced back, catching a glimpse of a man in a baseball cap at the counter. His head down, but his posture tense. Something about him felt off, like Ray Carver's shadow. Joe noticed, too, his hand tightening on Tommy's shoulder. "Let's go," he said, steering them to the truck. Tommy's stomach twisted, but he kept quiet, the Marina clue burning, a hole in his pocket. At Harper's Marina, Laura and Sam crept along the docks, the river lapping at the boats. The Marina was small, a cluster of slips with fishing rigs and speedboats. But Ethan's boat, a sleek 30-footer named Tide Runner, was docked at the far end. Laura's radio crackled with Maggie's voice. "Ethan's accounts show a big withdrawal yesterday. He's planning to bolt." Laura nodded, signaling Sam to flank the boat. They approached, guns holstered but ready. The Tide Runner was quiet, its deck empty, but a duffel bag sat by the helm, stuffed with clothes and cash. Laura's pulse quickened. Ethan was close. She boarded, her boots soft on the deck, and checked the cabin. Empty, but a map on the table showed a route down the coast, circled in red. "He's running," she whispered to Sam. "We need to—" A motor roared to life nearby. Laura spun, spotting a smaller boat speeding from the marina, a lone figure at the wheel. Ethan Malone, his face grim under a hood. "Sam, call it in!" Laura shouted, leaping back to the dock. They sprinted to their cruiser, but Ethan's boat was already a speck on the river, heading for open water. Laura cursed, radioing the Coast Guard. "Suspect fleeing south, white speedboat. Suspect is Ethan Malone. Intercept!" But her gut told her Ethan was too slippery, his Coast Guard training giving him an edge. She needed to cut him off, and fast. "Sam, get to the station. We're pulling every resource to track him." Back at Joe's house, Tommy sat on the porch, his bike locked away, his notebook open. Joe was inside, calling Laura to check in. Tommy's diner clue, Harper's Marina, itched at him. He couldn't sneak out again, but maybe Joe would listen. When Joe stepped out, Tommy held up his notebook. "Grandpa, I heard something at the diner. Ethan's at Harper's Marina. We gotta tell Laura." Joe's face darkened, but he saw the fire in Tommy's eyes, the same fire Hank had when chasing. "Justice." "All right," he said, grabbing his keys. "We'll call Laura from the station, but you're glued to me, got it?" Tommy nodded, relief flooding him. He'd messed up sneaking out before, but this felt right, helping Hank, helping Joe. At the station, Laura was on the phone with the Coast Guard when Joe and Tommy walked in. Tommy blurted, "I heard guys at the diner say Ethan's at Harper's Marina." Laura's eyes widened. "You're a step behind, kid," she said, but her voice held respect. "We just missed him there. He's on a boat heading south." Tommy's face fell, but Laura added, "Your clue confirms it. Good work." Joe ruffled Tommy's hair, pride mixing with worry. "Can you catch him?" he asked Laura. She nodded, her resolve like steel. "We will. Ethan's running out of, river." But as they left, Laura's phone buzzed with a Coast Guard update. Ethan's boat had vanished near a coastal inlet. No trace. She gripped the phone, knowing Ethan was planning his next move. That night, Tommy lay in bed, his notebook on his nightstand, Harper's Marina crossed out. Joe locked the doors, his fishing hat on the rack, but sleep was far off. The river outside whispered, and somewhere in its depths Ethan Malone plotted, his shadow stretching over Willow Creek, pulling Tommy and Laura closer to a truth that could break the town or heal it. The Willow River wound through the morning mist, its waters calm but heavy with secrets. It was July 9th, 2025, and Sheriff Laura Bennett sat at her desk in the Willow Creek Police Station, her eyes fixed on a satellite map of the coast. Ethan's. Malone, the former Coast Guard officer known as the Captain, had slipped away yesterday at Harper's Marina, his speedboat vanishing near a coastal inlet. Laura's raid on the shipyard 2 nights ago had busted his weapons smuggling ring, but Ethan was still out there, a shadow from Hank Grayson's past. The suitcase Tommy and Joe Miller found in the river, with Hank's letter, had unraveled a 3-year-old mystery, but it wasn't over. Laura's coffee was cold, her badge glinting under the lamp. Hank's letter. The Captain, they're watching. Me, sat locked in the safe, its words a constant prod. Ray Carver, now in custody, had named Ethan, but the bank account in Hank's name, matching the suitcase's cash, still cast a shadow. Laura was sure Hank had been framed, but catching Ethan was the only way to prove it. Her phone buzzed with a text from Maggie Ruiz. Ethan's accounts show a transfer to a shell company. Traced it to a cabin near Cutler's Inlet. Laura's pulse quickened. Cutler's Inlet was a maze of coves, perfect for hiding. She grabbed her jacket, calling Deputy Sam Carter. "We're hitting the inlet. Get the chopper ready." Across town, Tommy Miller sat on the floor of Joe's garage, grounded for the umpteenth time after sneaking to the station with his Harper's Marina clue. His notebook lay open, the words Ethan Malone and Marina scrawled in bold, the diner. Gossip he'd overheard yesterday had been spot on, but Ethan's escape stung. Tommy's detective books taught him that villains always left a trail, and he wasn't giving up. Joe was at the kitchen table, reading the paper, his fishing hat on the counter. "Tommy, you better not be plotting out there," he called, his voice half teasing, half warned. Tommy grinned, but his eyes were on Joe's old tackle box, a dented metal beast full of lures and memories. He'd been cleaning it to stay busy, but something caught his attention. A folded paper tucked under a tray of hooks. He pulled it out, heart skipping. It was a hand-drawn map, faded but clear, showing the Willow River's mouth and a spot labeled Cutler's Inlet, with an X marked Safe House. A note in the corner, in Hank's handwriting, read, "EM Hideout? Check 7-15-22. Tommy's jaw dropped. Hank had been on to Ethan 3 years ago, maybe days before he vanished. The map was a clue bigger than the fishing log or diner talk. He bolted to the kitchen, waving the paper. "Grandpa, look! Hank drew this. It's Ethan's hideout." Joe's face went from annoyed to stunned as he studied the map. At 68 he'd seen plenty, but this hit hard. "Where'd you find this?" he asked, voice low. "In your tackle box," Tommy said, bouncing on his toes. "Hank must have given it to you." Joe's eyes clouded, memories stirring. Hank was always leaving notes, said to keep him safe. "I forgot about this." His voice cracked. "We're taking it to Laura now, but you're not sneaking off again, got it?" Tommy nodded, his cap bobbing, but his mind raced. Cutler's Inlet. He was one step closer to catching the captain at Adityohan. Cutler's Inlet. Laura and Sam boarded a sheriff's department chopper, the blades slicing through the humid air. The inlet was a tangle of waterways dotted with cabins and hidden coves. Maggie's financial trace had pinpointed a cabin rented under Ethan's shell company, and Hank's map, unknown to Laura, marked the same spot. Laura's radio crackled, with Coast Guard updates. No sign of Ethan's boat, but a recent fuel purchase suggested he was nearby. "He's cornered," Laura told Sam, her voice steady but fierce. "We end this today." The chopper landed on a grassy patch near the inlet, and Laura's team, 4 deputies plus Sam, fanned out, moving quietly through the pines. The cabin, a weathered shack with a dock, sat silent, its windows dark. Laura signaled Sam to check the perimeter while she approached the door, her hand on her holster. Inside, the air was stale, but a table held a burner phone, a half-eaten sandwich, and a nautical chart with Cutler's Inlet circled. Ethan had been here, maybe hours ago. Laura's heart sank as she spotted a note pinned to the wall. "Nice try, Sheriff. River's deeper than you think." Ethan was taunting her, always one step ahead. Sam burst in. "Found fresh boot prints leading to the dock. He's got another boat." They sprinted outside, spotting a ripple in the water, a small skiff disappearing. Around a bend, Laura radioed the chopper. "Suspect fleeing by boat South Channel. Track him." But the inlet's maze made pursuit tricky, and Ethan knew it better than anyone. Back in Willow Creek, Joe and Tommy pulled up to the station, the map clutched in Joe's hand. Laura was still at the inlet, so Maggie greeted them, her eyes widening at the map. "This is Hank's handwriting," she said, scanning it. "Cutler's Inlet. It matches our trace on Ethan's cabin." Tommy beamed. "I knew it." Maggie ruffled his hair. "You're a regular Sherlock kid. Laura's there now. I'll radio her the map details." Joe's face was grim but proud. "Tell Laura to be careful," he said. "Ethan's slippery." Maggie nodded, her radio already crackling. Tommy's chest swelled. He'd helped again, even grounded, but worry crept in. Ethan was out there and Laura was chasing a ghost. At the inlet, Laura's team regrouped as the chopper reported losing. Ethan's skiff in the coves. Laura studied the nautical chart from the cabin, her mind racing. Ethan was running, but he wasn't gone. Hank's letter had mentioned the river's end, and Cutler's Inlet was close to the Willow River's mouth. Was Ethan circling back to Willow Creek? She radioed Maggie for updates, learning about Tommy's map. "Kid's a menace," she muttered, but a smile tugged at her lips. The map's X matched the cabin, confirming Ethan's hideout. Laura called the Coast Guard for backup, setting up a net across the inlet's exits. "He's got nowhere to go," she told Sam, but her gut twisted. Ethan's note felt personal, like he knew her moves. As dusk fell, the team staked out the inlet, the river's hum a constant reminder of Hank's fate. That evening, Joe and Tommy sat at Evelyn's diner, splitting a milkshake to celebrate the map find. Evelyn winked, sliding them extra fries. "Heard you're helping Laura, Tommy," she said. Joe shot her a look, but Tommy grinned, just a little. The diner buzzed, but Tommy's eyes caught a man in a corner booth, his face hidden by a cap, his hands fidgety. He looked like the guy from yesterday, and Tommy's stomach knotted. Was Ethan back in town? Joe noticed, his hand on Tommy's, Yarfton arm. "Time to go," he said, voice low. They paid and left, the man's eyes following them. Tommy whispered. "Grandpa, that guy's creepy." Joe nodded, his truck roaring to life. "We're telling Laura." At home, Joe locked the doors, his fishing hat on the rack, while Tommy clutched his notebook. The map's X burned into his mind. At Cutler's Inlet, Laura's radio crackled with a Coast Guard alert. A skiff matching Ethan's was spotted near Willow Creek's river mouth, heading upstream. Laura's heart pounded. Ethan wasn't running. He was doubling back, maybe to tie up loose ends. She boarded the chopper, her team trailing, the river guiding her toward a showdown that would either catch the captain or bury Hank's truth forever. The Willow River glowed under the twilight, its ripples catching the last light of July 9th, 2025. Sheriff Laura Bennett crouched behind a cluster of reeds near the river mouth, her eyes locked on the water. The Coast Guard's alert had come hours ago. Ethan Malone, the captain, was steering a skiff upstream from Cutler's Inlet, doubling back to Willow Creek. Laura's raid on the shipyard and chase at Harper's Marina had cornered him, but Ethan was slippery, his Coast Guard training making him a ghost. Hank Grayson's letter, found in the suitcase Tommy and Joe Miller pulled from the river, had exposed Ethan's weapons smuggling ring, and Laura was determined to end it tonight. Her radio crackled softly. "Coast Guard's got boats at the inlet's exits," Deputy Sam Carter whispered, positioned 100 yards downstream. "No sign of Ethan yet." Laura nodded, her badge heavy in her pocket. Hank's words, "They're watching me," echoed alongside the bank account in his name that suggested he'd been dirty. Laura was certain Ethan had framed Hank, but catching him was the only way to clear her mentor's name. Maggie Ruiz's trace on Ethan's finances and Tommy's map from Joe's tackle box had led her here to the river's end. She set a trap, 2 sheriff's boats hidden in the shadows, a chopper on standby, and Sam's team ready to close the net. Across town, Tommy Miller sat on his bed, his notebook open to a page scrawled with Cutler's Inlet and Diner Guy. He was grounded, his bike locked away, but the suspicious man he'd seen at Evelyn's diner that evening gnawed at him. The guy's fidgety hands and shadowed face felt like Ray Carver's menace, but Ray was in jail. Was it Ethan or one of his men? Joe had promised to call Laura about it, but Tommy's detective book said, "You didn't wait when the bad guy was close." He had to know. Joe was in the living room, the phone to his ear, leaving a voicemail for Laura. "It's Joe. Tommy saw a guy at the diner, looked suspicious. Call me." He hung up, his fishing hat on the rack, his gray hair catching the lamplight. At 68, Joe's heart was heavy. Hank's loss, Tommy's stubbornness, and now Ethan's shadow. He checked on Tommy, finding him scribbling. "Bedtime, kid," Joe said, voice firm. "No more sleuthing." Tommy's freckled face scrunched. "But, Grandpa, that guy at the diner, he could be with Ethan." Joe sighed, sitting on the bed. "You've done enough, Tommy. Laura's got the map, the raid, your clues. Let her handle it." Tommy's eyes welled up. "I just want Hank's name cleared. For you." Joe's throat tightened, memories of Hank's laugh flashing by. "I know," he said, hugging Tommy. "But you're my priority. Sleep?" Tommy nodded, but as Joe left, he slipped his notebook under his pillow. The diner guy was a clue, and Laura was busy chasing Ethan. He'd seen the man head toward the old mill near the river mouth, a crumbling spot where kids dared each other to explore. Tommy's heart raced. If he could just get a peek, maybe snap a photo, Laura would have another piece of the puzzle. He waited until Joe's snores filled the house, then grabbed his flashlight and sneakers, creeping out the back door. At the river mouth, Laura's trap was set, the sheriff's boat silent in the dark. The river hummed, its current steady, but Laura's gut twisted. Ethan's note from the Cutler's Inlet cabin, "Rivers deeper than you think," felt like a dare. Her radio buzzed with Maggie's voice. "Choppers picking up a heat signature, small boat, half a mile out." Laura's grip tightened on her binoculars, spotting a faint ripple. "That's him," she whispered. "Hold positions." The skiff emerged, its motor low. A lone figure at the helm. Ethan Malone, his hood up, eyes scanning the banks. Laura signaled Sam, and the sheriff's boats eased forward, cutting off his path. Ethan's head snapped up, realizing the trap. He gunned the motor, veering toward a narrow channel, but the Coast Guard's floodlights blazed, pinning him in place. "Ethan Malone, you're under arrest," Laura shouted through a megaphone. "Cut the engine." Ethan's skiff slowed, but his hand moved to a duffel bag at his feet. Laura's instinct screamed, "Weapon!" "Sam, cover me!" she yelled. Boarding a sheriff's boat as it closed in, Ethan stood, a pistol glinting in his hand, but before he could aim, Sam's team fired a warning shot, the crack echoing over the river. Ethan froze, his face twisted with rage, and dropped the gun, raising his hands. Laura cuffed him, her heart pounding. "It's over, Captain," she said, shoving him onto the boat. At the old mill, Tommy crouched behind a rusted barrel, his flashlight off, the river mouth visible through the trees. He'd followed the diner guy's path, spotting a pickup truck parked near the mill, its bed covered with a tarp. The man stood by the truck, talking, on a burner phone, his voice low. "But clear. Boss got nabbed at the river mouth," he said. "What's the play?" Tommy's breath caught. The boss was Ethan, and this guy was his backup. Tommy's hands shook as he snapped a photo, the flash off, to stay hidden. The man hung up, pacing, then pulled the tarp back, revealing crates like the ones from the shipyard. More weapons. Tommy's heart thumped. This was huge, but he was alone. No Joe, no Laura. He backed away, planning to bike to the station, but a twig snapped under his sneaker. The man spun, his eyes locking onto Tommy's shadow. "Who's there?" he growled, drawing a knife. Tommy bolted, his flashlight bouncing, the mill's ruins a blur. The man gave chase, his boots pounding, but Tommy's small size let him duck through a broken wall, scrambling toward the river path. He didn't stop until he reached Joe's house, gasping, his photo safe on his phone. Joe was awake, the porch light on, his face furious. "Tommy, where were you?" he shouted, pulling him inside. "I was about to call Laura." Tommy spilled the story, showing the photo. "The guy from the diner, he's got weapons at the mill." Joe's anger melted into fear, his hand shaking as he dialed Laura. "You're going to give me a heart attack, kid," he said, but his hug was tight. "No more, Tommy, I mean it." At the station, Laura was booking Ethan when Joe's call came through. She listened, her eyes widening at Tommy's photo. "Another stash at the mill?" she said, glancing at Ethan, who sat cuffed, his smirk gone. "Who's your man there, Ethan?" Ethan's eyes flickered, but he stayed silent. Laura grabbed Sam. "Take a team to the mill. Tommy's ID'd another player." Sam's team raided the mill, finding the pickup in crates, but the man was gone, his phone left behind. The crates held more rifles, tying to Ethan's ring. Laura interrogated Ethan, his silence infuriating but telling. "You framed Hank," she said, slamming the suitcase's letter on the table. "Why?" Ethan's jaw twitched. "Hank got too close," he said finally, voice cold. "River took care of him." Laura's blood boiled, but she held it together, locking Ethan in a cell. Tommy's clue had cracked the case wider, but the diner guy was loose, and Ethan's words about the river chilled her. Was Hank's body out there, waiting to be found? That night, Tommy sat on Joe's couch, his notebook closed, grounded for good. Joe locked the doors, his fishing hat on the rack. "You did good, kid," he said, voice soft, "but you're done." Tommy nodded, but his eyes drifted to the river, where the diner guy's shadow lingered, a loose thread in a mystery that wasn't quite solved. The Willow River flowed dark and silent under the stars, its secrets buried deep. It was the evening of July 10th, 2025, and Sheriff Laura Bennett stood on the riverbank, her flashlight sweeping the water's edge. Ethan Malone, the captain, was behind bars, his weapons, smuggling ring, shattered after Laura's trap at the river mouth last night. But Ethan's chilling words, "Hank got too close. River took care of him," had lit a fire in Laura. Hank Grayson, her mentor, hadn't. Just vanished 3 years ago. He'd been murdered, and the river held the truth. The suitcase Tommy and Joe Miller found, with Hank's letter exposing the ring, had brought Laura this far, and she wouldn't stop until Hank's name was cleared. Laura's radio crackled. "Dive team's ready for dawn," Deputy Sam Carter's said, his voice steady despite the late hour. "We'll search from the mill to the river mouth." Laura nodded, her badge glinting in the moonlight. The bank account in Hank's name, stuffed with cash like the suitcases, was a frame job. She was sure of it now, after Ethan's confession. But Tommy's photo from the old mill, showing more weapons and a mysterious diner guy, meant Ethan's network wasn't dead. Laura had to find that man, and whatever Hank's body could tell her. At Joe's house, Tommy Miller sat cross-legged on the living room floor, grounded for life after sneaking to the mill. His notebook was confiscated, but Joe had left Hank's hand-drawn map from the tackle box on the kitchen table, its X marking Cutler's Inlet. Tommy's heart still raced from the mill chase, the diner guy's knife, the crates of rifles, his mad dash home. Joe was in the garage tinkering with a boat motor, his fishing hat on the rack. At 68, Joe's patience was threadbare, but his love for Tommy kept him steady. "No more detective stuff, Tommy," he'd shouted earlier, his voice cracking. With fear? Tommy's eyes drifted to the map, its creases worn from years of hiding. He shouldn't touch it. Joe would ground him till he was 30. But his detective book said, "Clues hid in plain sight." He glanced at the garage, hearing Joe's hammer, and crept to the table. Unfolding the map, he noticed a corner bent oddly, like it was glued. His fingers pried it open, revealing a tiny folded note in Hank's handwriting. "Diner guy or C. Walsh. Works for EM. Watch him." Tommy's breath caught. C. Walsh. The diner guy had a name, and Hank had known he was Ethan's man. Tommy's hand shook as he tucked the note in his pocket. He had to tell Laura, but Joe would never let him out after last night. The station was a bike ride away, and Laura was probably at the river. Tommy's heart thumped. He'd promised Joe no more sneaking, but this was for Hank. He scribbled a quick note, "Gone to station, found clue, sorry," and left it on the table, grabbing his flashlight. He'd be back before Joe noticed. At the riverbank, Laura met with Maggie Ruiz, who'd been analyzing the mill's burner phone. "Got a partial number off it," Maggie said, her laptop glowing. "Ties to a Calvin Walsh, ex-dock worker, worked at the shipyard in 22. Laura's eyes narrowed. "That's our diner guy. Tommy's photo matches an old ID." Maggie nodded. "He's off the grid, but I'm tracking his last known address, near the mill." Laura's jaw tightened. "Find him. He's Ethan's cleanup crew." Laura's phone buzzed with a voicemail from Joe, warning about the diner guy. She cursed, realizing Tommy's instincts were sharp again. "Sam, check on Joe and Tommy," she told Sam, who nodded and headed out. Laura turned back to the river, the dive, team's boats bobbing in the distance. Hank's fate was close. She could feel it, but Walsh was a loose end, and Tommy's knack for trouble worried her. Tommy pedaled through Willow Creek's quiet streets, the river glinting beside him. The station's lights were dim, but Maggie's cruiser was there. He burst in, waving the note. "Maggie, I found this in Hank's map. Calvin Walsh. He's the diner guy." Maggie's eyes widened, grabbing the note. "Kid, you're unbelievable," she said, radioing Laura. "Laura, Tommy's got a name. Calvin Walsh, from Hank's map. Matches our guy." Laura's voice crackled back, tense. "Good work, Tommy, but get home, now." Tommy's pride fizzled. Laura sounded mad. Maggie drove him back, lights off to avoid attention. At Joe's house, the porch light blazed and Joe stood waiting, his face a storm. "Tommy Miller, you're killing me," he shouted, pulling Tommy into a hug. "I found your note. No more." Tommy's eyes welled up. "I had to, Grandpa. For Hank." Joe sighed, his anger softening. "You're too much like him, kid." Maggie filled Joe in, promising extra patrols around the house. "Walsh is still out there," she said. "Stay locked down." Joe nodded, his hand on Tommy's shoulder. Tommy clutched Hank's note, his heart heavy but proud. He'd helped, but Walsh's shadow loomed, and the river search scared him. What if they found Hank? At dawn, Laura stood by the river as the dive team began, their lights piercing the murky water. Sam returned, confirming Tommy was safe but grounded. "Kid's a handful," he said, shaking his head. Laura smiled faintly, but her focus was the river. The divers worked methodically, scanning from the mill to the river mouth. Hours passed, the sun climbing, until a diver surfaced, his face grim. "Found something," he said, holding up a rusted badge. "Hank's, engraved with his initials." Laura's heart sank, her fingers closing around the badge. "Keep looking," she told the team, her voice steady but raw. The divers found more, a weighted bag, bones inside, tied to a concrete block. Laura's throat tightened. Hank, dumped like trash. The coroner would confirm, but she knew. Ethan's words rang true. The river had taken him. Back at the station, Laura sat with Hank's badge, her resolve hardening. Maggie burst in. "Got a hit on Walsh. Neighbor saw him near the mill, driving a blue sedan, an hour ago." Laura stood, grabbing her jacket. "Let's move. He's tying up Ethan's loose ends." She called Sam, organizing a search grid around the mill. Ethan was cuffed, but Walsh was his last play, and Laura wouldn't let him slip away. At Joe's house, Tommy sat on the couch, his notebook returned but unopened. Joe cooked breakfast, his eyes red from a sleepless night. "Laura called," he said, setting down pancakes. "They found Hank's badge in the river." Tommy's fork froze, his chest tight. "Is he gone?" Joe nodded, his voice soft. "Looks like it, kid. But you helped find him. Hank'd be proud." Tommy's eyes drifted to the river outside, where Hank's truth had surfaced. Walsh was still out there, a shadow like Ethan's. Tommy wanted to help, but Joe's hug grounded him. "We're done chasing, Tommy," Joe said. "Laura's got this." Tommy nodded, but the note in his pocket burned, and Walsh's name echoed, a final clue in a mystery that held Willow Creek in its grip. Across town, Laura's cruiser sped toward the mill, Sam's team fanning out. The river glinted, its secrets spilling, but Walsh's blue sedan was a ghost, and Laura knew the hunt wasn't over. Hank's badge sat heavy in her pocket, a promise to finish what he started, no matter what the river hid. The Willow River murmured under the midday sun, its secrets now half revealed. It was July 11th, 2025, and Sheriff Laura Bennett sped toward a warehouse near the old mill, her cruiser's tires kicking up dust. The dive team's discovery yesterday? Hank. Grayson's badge and remains in the river had confirmed Ethan Malone's chilling confession. Hank had been murdered for getting too close to the weapons smuggling ring. Ethan, the captain, was in jail, but Calvin Walsh, the diner guy Tommy Miller had photographed with more weapons, was still a ghost. Laura's grip tightened on the wheel. Walsh was Ethan's last loose end, and she'd run him down. Today, Hank's badge sat heavy in her pocket, a reminder of the mentor who'd shaped her. The suitcase Tommy and Joe pulled from the river, with Hank's letter exposing the ring, had unraveled a 3-year-old mystery. The bank account in Hank's name, stuffed with cash, was a frame job. Laura was certain now. And Ethan's arrest proved it. But Walsh's blue sedan, spotted near the mill, meant the fight wasn't over. Laura's radio crackled. "Team's in position," Deputy Sam Carter said. "Warehouse looks quiet, but we've got eyes on all exits." Laura nodded. "Move in slow. Walsh is desperate." At Joe's house, Tommy slouched on the couch, his notebook locked in Joe's desk drawer after his latest stunt, sneaking to the station with Hank's note about Calvin Walsh. The news of Hank's remains had hit hard, his chest tight with grief for a man he'd only known through Joe's stories. Joe, flipping pancakes in the kitchen, glanced over, his fishing hat on the counter. At 68, Joe's heart ached for Hank, but keeping Tommy safe was his anchor. "You're staying put today, kid," he said, voice firm but warm. "No more chasing." "Shadows," Tommy's freckled face scrunched. "But Grandpa, Walsh is still out there. Hank'd want us to help." Joe set down the spatula, his gray hair catching the light. "Hank'd want you alive, Tommy. You've done more than enough. Map, note, photos. Laura's got Walsh." Tommy's shoulders slumped, but his mind buzzed. His detective book said the final clue was always close, and Walsh's name burned in his memory. After breakfast, Joe headed to the garage to fix a fishing reel, leaving Tommy to wash dishes. But Tommy's eyes drifted to the garage door, where Joe kept old boxes of fishing gear and memories. Hank had spent hours there with Joe, tinkering and talking. Maybe there was another clue, like the map in the tackle box. Tommy dried his hands, guilt tugging at him, but he slipped into the garage, the air thick with oil and dust. He rummaged through a cardboard box labeled Hank's Stuff, finding lures, a broken rod, and a small envelope. Inside was a faded photo, Hank, Joe, and a third man at the shipyard, 2022, grinning by a boat. The third man's face was familiar, sharp jaw, cold eyes. Tommy's heart skipped. It was the diner guy, Calvin Walsh, younger but unmistakable. On the back, Hank's handwriting read, C. Walsh, shipyard crew, tied to EM? Tommy's jaw dropped. Hank had suspected Walsh years ago, and this photo tied him to the shipyard's dark past. Tommy clutched the photo, his pulse racing. He had to get it to Laura, but Joe would ground him forever if he sneaked out again. He ran to the kitchen, finding Joe back inside. "Grandpa, look," he said, holding up the photo. "It's Walsh with you and Hank. He worked for Ethan." Joe's face paled, memories flooding back. "That's Cal," he said, voice low. Hank didn't trust him, said he was too cozy with the shipyard bosses. "Why didn't I remember?" Joe grabbed his keys. "We're going to the station together. No sneaking." Tommy nodded, relief mixing with excitement. He'd broken his promise before, but now Joe was with him, and the photo was gold. As they climbed into the truck, Tommy glanced at the river, its glint a reminder of Hank's sacrifice. At the warehouse, Laura and Sam's team crept through a side door, flashlights sweeping the dim interior. Crates lined the walls, some marked with the same codes as the shipyard's weapons. Laura's radio buzzed with Maggie Ruiz's voice. "Got a hit on Walsh's sedan. Parked a block away, engine still warm." Laura's eyes narrowed. "He's here," she whispered, signaling Sam to fan out. The air was thick with tension. The hum of the river faint through the walls. A shadow moved in the back, and Laura froze, her hand on her holster. "Calvin Walsh, show yourself," she called, voice steady. A crate toppled, and Walsh bolted from behind a stack, a crowbar in hand. Sam tackled him, but Walsh swung, catching Sam's shoulder. Laura dove in, pinning Walsh to the ground, her knee on his back. "You're done, Calvin," she said, cuffing him. Walsh cursed, his eyes wild. "You'll never stop it," he spat. "Ethan's just the start." Laura hauled him up, her mind racing. Just the start? Was there a bigger player behind Ethan? She shoved Walsh into a cruiser, Sam nursing his shoulder but nodding. "Good catch, Sheriff," he said. Laura's phone buzzed, Joe saying he and Tommy were at the station with a new clue. "Stay there," she told him, her gut twisting. Tommy's clues were uncanny, but Walsh's words chilled her. At the station, Joe and Tommy waited in Laura's office, the photo on her desk. Maggie studied it, her eyes wide. "This is Walsh, all right," she said. "Hank was onto him in 22. This ties him to the shipyard. And Ethan." Tommy beamed, but Joe's face was grim. "Hank tried to warn me," he said. "I should have listened." Maggie patted his shoulder. "You're helping now, Joe. Tommy, you're a hero." Laura stormed in, Walsh's words echoing in her head. She grabbed the photo, her jaw tightening. "You two are unbelievable," she said, a rare smile breaking through. "Walsh is in custody thanks to your mill photo, Tommy. This seals his link to Ethan." Tommy's chest swelled, but Laura's eyes turned serious. "But Walsh said Ethan's not the top dog. There's someone else." Joe's face darkened. "Who?" Laura shook her head. "Walsh isn't talking yet, but we'll break him. For now you're both under lockdown. No more clues, Tommy." Tommy nodded, but his mind spun. Someone bigger than Ethan? His detective book said the real villain hid in the shadows, and Willow Creek wasn't done spilling secrets. That evening, Laura sat at the station, Hank's badge on her desk beside the photo. The coroner's report confirmed the remains were Hank's, his death a brutal end to a brave fight. Laura's resolve hardened. She'd find the puppet master Walsh hinted at for Hank. Maggie burst in. Got something from Walsh's phone. Deleted text, sent yesterday. Mentions a Victor calling shots. Laura's blood ran cold. Victor Malone, Ethan's brother, the slick Seattle businessman she'd questioned. Was he the real captain? At Joe's house, Tommy lay in bed. The photo's image burned into his mind. Joe locked the doors, his fishing hat on the rack, his heart heavy with Hank's loss. You did good, kid, he said, tucking Tommy in. But it's over. Tommy nodded, but his eyes drifted to the river, where Victor Malone's shadow loomed, a final piece in a puzzle that could shatter Willow Creek or set it free. The Willow River sparkled under the morning sun, its waters carrying the weight of secrets finally laid bare. It was July 12, 2025, and Sheriff Laura Bennett sat in her cruiser outside a sleek Seattle office building, her eyes fixed on the glass doors. Victor Malone, Ethan's older brother and a polished businessman, was the puppet master behind the weapons smuggling ring, according to a deleted text from Calvin Walsh's phone. Ethan, the captain, and Walsh were in custody, but Victor was the real architect, and Laura was here to bring him down. Hank Grayson's badge, found with his remains in the river, sat heavy in her pocket, a promise to finish what her mentor started. Laura's radio crackled. Victor's in his office, top floor, Deputy Sam Carter said, stationed at a nearby cafe. No security detail, but he's jumpy. Laura nodded, her jaw tight. The suitcase Tommy and Joe Miller found in the river with Hank's letter, exposing the ring, had led her here through shipyard raids, mill chases, and river dives. Hank's murder, framed as a disappearance with a fake bank account, was Victor's doing. She felt it in her bones. Today, she'd prove it. Back in Willow Creek, Tommy Miller sat at Joe's kitchen table, his notebook finally open again, though he hadn't written in it since Hank's remains were found. Joe, pouring coffee, glanced over, his fishing hat on. The counter. At 68, Joe's heart still ached for Hank, but Tommy's safety was his lifeline. You're quiet, kid, he said, voice soft. That's not like you. Tommy's freckled face lifted, eyes heavy. Just thinking about Hank, Grandpa. Did he ever talk about Victor Malone? Joe froze, the coffee pot trembling. He set it down, memories stirring. Hank mentioned Victor once, years back, he said, sitting across from Tommy. Said he was trouble, always pushing Ethan into shady deals at the shipyard. Hank thought Victor was using Ethan as a front. Tommy's eyes widened, his detective books flashing in his mind. That's why Victor's the boss. Hank knew, Joe nodded, his voice low. I should have listened to him. Come on, let's call Laura. She needs this. Tommy's heart raced. He'd promised to stop sleuthing, but Joe's story was the final piece. They dialed Laura, leaving. A voicemail. Laura, it's Joe. Hank suspected Victor Malone ran the show, used Ethan as a cover. Be careful. Tommy clutched his notebook, pride mixing with worry. He'd helped clear Hank's name, but Victor scared him more than Ethan or Walsh. In Seattle, Laura stepped into Victor's office, her badge gleaming. Victor, in a tailored suit, sat behind a mahogany desk, his smile slick but his eyes nervous. Sheriff Bennett, what a surprise, he said, gesturing to a chair. Laura stayed standing. Cut the act, Victor. We've got Ethan and Walsh. Your text to Walsh's phone ties you to the smuggling ring. You're the real captain? Victor's smile faltered, his fingers tapping the desk. You've got nothing, he said, but his voice wavered. Laura slid Hank's badge across the desk, her eyes locked on his. Hank Grayson got too close, so you killed him. Framed him with a bank account. The river gave him up, Victor. It's over. Victor's face paled, his hand twitching toward a drawer. Laura's gun was out in a flash. Don't, she said, voice steel. Victor froze, then slumped, the fight draining out of him. Hank was a problem, he admitted, voice low. He found my ledger, shipyard deals, weapons, everything. I had Ethan and Walsh take care of him. Laura's blood boiled, but she kept her cool, cuffing Victor as Sam burst in with Seattle PD backup. "You're done," she said, shoving him toward the door. Victor's eyes darted, but there was no escape. At the station in Willow Creek, Laura processed Victor, his confession recorded. Ethan and Walsh, faced with Victor's betrayal, spilled more. Victor had funneled millions through the shipyard, using Ethan's Coast Guard skills and Walsh's muscle to move weapons. Hank's snooping threatened it all, so Victor ordered his death, staging the bank account to discredit him. Laura clutched Hank's badge, her heart heavy but resolute. Hank was clean, his name restored. Maggie Ruiz burst in holding a file, found Victor's ledger in his Seattle office, matches Hank's notes from the suitcase. It's airtight. Laura nodded, a weight lifting. Good work, Maggie. Let's close this. Sam clapped her shoulder. Hank'd be proud, Sheriff. Laura smiled faintly, but her thoughts turned to Tommy and Joe. They'd sparked this, and they deserved to know it was over. At Joe's house, Tommy and Joe sat on the porch, the river, glinting in the distance. Laura's cruiser pulled up and she stepped out, Hank's badge in hand. Tommy's eyes lit up, but Joe stood wary. It's done, Laura said, voice soft. Victor Malone confessed. He ran the ring, killed Hank, framed him. Your suitcase, Tommy's clues, map, photo, note, broke it open. Hank's name is clear. Joe's eyes welled up, his hand trembling as he took the badge. My friend, he whispered, clutching it. Tommy hugged him, tears streaking his face. We did it, Grandpa, for Hank. Laura ruffled Tommy's hair. You're a hero, kid, but no more detective work. Deal? Tommy grinned, his cap bobbing. Deal. But his notebook, tucked in his pocket, whispered of future mysteries. That. Evening, Willow Creek gathered at the riverbank for a memorial. Laura stood with Joe and Tommy, the town's faces lit by lanterns. Evelyn from the diner wiped tears, and Sam and Maggie bowed their heads. Laura spoke, her voice steady. Hank Grayson was our sheriff, our friend. He fought for truth, and the river gave him back to us. His legacy lives in Willow Creek. Joe placed Hank's badge on a small plaque engraved Hank Grayson, Hero of the River. Tommy lit a lantern, letting it float skyward, its glow joining dozens more. The river hummed, its secrets released, and Tommy felt Hank's presence, a quiet thank you. Joe's arm around him was warm, grounding, and Laura's nod was a promise. Willow Creek was safe. As the crowd dispersed, Tommy glanced at the river, its waters calm but alive. His detective days were paused, but the river's stories weren't done. He squeezed Joe's hand, ready for whatever came next, while Laura walked back to her cruiser, Hank's badge in her heart, the town's trust in her hands. The Willow River flowed on, its glint a testament to truth won, a mystery solved, and a hero honored at its end. Thanks for joining us on this wild ride with the suitcase in the river. What did you think of Tommy's detective skills or Laura's big takedown? Drop a comment below and let us know. If you loved this story, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next adventure. Willow Creek's secrets are out, but who knows what mysteries we'll uncover next. See you in the next video.